I'm getting there. Hold on. Sorry. I know Pastor Aaron's a lot more put together than this. I got my stuff. I got my Kleenex. We are all good to go, right? Right? Thank you. Sorry. I want to start first by telling you a little something. I love comedy and watching comedians. And sometimes the best comedians have a way of finding something about our human nature and amplifying it and making us laugh, right? And sometimes some of the best Christian comedians to me are the best preachers because they'll get you laughing. And the next thing you know, they say something and you're like, oh, crap, they're talking about me. And so I first came across this comedian when I was a kid, and his name is George Carlin. Anybody know who George Carlin is? I'm going to do some PG-rated George Carlin. He did this little bit talking about his stuff. But it first did it in 1986 at a thing called Comic Relief, which was a benefit to fight poverty. And he had this way of humorously telling us some hard truths about our tendencies in life. And he said it this way. He said, if you think about this, our house, think about it. Our house is just a place to keep our stuff. Because if you had a little bit of stuff, you could just put it in your pockets and you wouldn't need a house. So a house is just there with a pile of stuff and then it's wrapped up in it. And in there we keep our good stuff and we keep our bad stuff and we lock it up when we leave because we don't want anybody, what? To break in and steal our stuff, right? He says, because when they break in and they steal your stuff, they always take the shiny stuff, right? They never take the junk stuff or the stuff, like the fourth grade papers that you've been saving from your kids for the last 20 years. They never take that. They take the big, shiny stuff. And he says, when you travel as well and you fly in your airplane, you look down and you see all of those houses. You know what you're seeing? You're seeing piles of stuff with houses over the top of them, right? And there comes a time where you've lived in a house long enough, eventually you have to get a storage unit or a storage shed, right? Because there's what? Not enough room for your stuff. And then when that happens, we have to get maybe the next house, the bigger house, the forever house, because we have more stuff. And have you ever noticed that when you go to your friends, maybe in your life group, he doesn't say life group, but you go to your friend's house and they tell you to just make yourself at home. You never feel 100% at home. You know why? Because there's no room for your stuff. Their stuff is littered all over the place. And when you travel, you've got to get a couple suitcases, your bags. Why? Because you need to take stuff with you. Your suitcases are just miniature versions of your house, which carries all of your what? Stuff. Okay, I'm going to stop there. He continues on and on. There's something, though, about good comedy that can highlight something in our nature and help us see it with a lot more clarity. Here's the thing. What I know about stuff is there's truth in it when it comes from George Carlin, but there's also truth in it when it comes from Jesus, because Jesus cares about our stuff and what we do with it. He has a lot of things to say about how we accumulate and share it and give it and care for it. And since Jesus has a lot to say about that, then we need to look at it, which we're going to do over the next 3 weeks as we talk about tidying up our lives through the spiritual discipline of simplicity. Now, before we go deeper, your program is a place to take some notes. Don't hesitate to do that, to look something up later, to share it with somebody else. You can also, out in the lobby, grab one of these as a study guide that goes along with every week in this series and a place for you to write down things, maybe on your own or with your life group. You can also, if you're a digital person, download this off our website. So don't hesitate to do that, to go deeper into these topics, into these scriptures, and I'm able to in the time that we have. And just one quick note, for those of you who have been going to St. Paul's for quite a long time, you might remember that this is a time of year where we talk about generosity and stewardship and how we fund the mission of leading people to an active faith in Jesus Christ next year. This is not what this is about. Just so you know, so you can have a big sigh of relief. We're going to talk about that in January. But that's not what this is about. I want to get back to stuff. So think about this. This is some other funny things. What was it like several decades ago when you wanted to buy something? Now, I was raised in the 80s. My parents were much older than I am. I guess that makes sense. That was one of the stupidest things I have said all day. But growing up in the 80s, I learned from the way my parents were raised on what it took to get stuff. And it took two things: effort and time. And by that, I mean, I was raised to believe you had to work hard for money and to save it up. And whenever you had enough for whatever it is you wanted to get, you had to go out and buy it. And by go out, I mean actually like brush your teeth and comb your hair and put on something that doesn't stink and go down to whatever store it is, pick up your stuff, walk back home or drive back home, and then enjoy the stuff that you took all that time and effort to get. But that's not the case anymore, is it? No money? No problem. We got credit. And listen, nowadays, you can just get stuff with a click of a button. How do I know this? Is because this sweater came with one click of the button on my phone. All these places have figured out how to help you get stuff. Amazon is especially talented at this. They have engineered things in such a way that with one click, you don't even have to go to like a shopping cart, then to choose this or to check out. It's just a buy it now button. And you click it, and next thing you know, it shows up. And if a click is a little bit too much for you to do, if you have an Alexa-enabled device, you can actually order stuff just by speaking it into existence. Alexa, order me toilet paper. She'll do it. Now, for some of us, though, just so you know, Alexa app, we're not quite set up for home delivery because we're just not like the big city. But we're getting there. And so what I've learned is now you could get whatever you want at any time of day. You don't even have to get dressed. You can show up in your pajamas or less to get stuff. But listen, you Alexa people, just a little bit of warning. I was reading this week that parents have discovered that kids are smart. By the way, your kids are smart. This is a warning. Kids will order stuff on Alexa. And since kids are usually home before mom and dad are, they get stuff in the mail first. And mom and dad don't know they've ever purchased anything until they get a credit card bill. Parents, you have been warned. But it's not just kids. It's pets. Watch this.
A parrot kicked out of a British animal sanctuary for using foul language figures out how to use technology to cause trouble. Rocco, an African gray parrot, was adopted by a sanctuary worker. She says her Amazon account suddenly had pending orders for items including ice cream, watermelon, strawberries.
No.
Well, it turns out that Rocco was using Amazon's Alexa to shop online while his owner was away. She had to place a parental lock on the Echo device. African gray parrots, in case you don't know, they're known for their advanced cognitive abilities and ability to mimic speech. So I guess that placing orders.
Alexa!
I want a Mercedes. And I want it now.
You got a list.
I want a Mercedes and I want it now.
There's some strawberries.
There's some strawberries and some ice cream.
Wow, right? We live in a world that is perfectly engineered for us to accumulate stuff. We are. And secretly, even though we might not say it out loud, especially at church, because the preacher's talking about it, we believe that more stuff and bigger stuff is better. We do. Somewhere along the line, I know it's true about you because it's true about me. I believe that more and bigger are better. Think about this. The average house that's being built today is over 1,000 square feet larger than the houses that were built 30 years ago. Just bigger. We have more stuff. That's almost double the size of an average home from 30 years ago. The average size of a master closet being built today is 10 feet by 10 feet. 100 square feet. That might not seem like it's very big, but my wife and I bought a 120-year-old house not too long ago, and I got to tell you, 10 by 10 is a lot of the size of bedrooms. We want things bigger, and it's not just houses. We want everything bigger. For instance, I brought stuff here. I'm going to pick on some of you. So growing up, my dad was a coffee drinker, and I wasn't a coffee drinker, and I remember him drinking coffee out of something like that. You know where I'm going. I just got a coffee cup last year. It's that. And I'm not going to just pick on you coffee drinkers because I'm a soda drinker. When my dad was young and he wanted to go get a soda, he had to go get one that size, right? And then whenever I lived in the Philippines, we had soda delivered to the house all the time because you couldn't drink the water everywhere. And they would show up in bottles this size. Now, not Jones soda because they didn't have it. And I have this because it's got my dog Chubbs on the front. Okay, it's not my dog, but he might as well. But this isn't enough either because you know why? Oh, thank you, Lord. If you know me, I've always got one of these with me, right? Because more is better, right? We think more is better. The American character is to believe that being big is something that is worthy of being admired and respected and revered, maybe even glorify it. We seem to measure excellence by size and a lot of different things. Cars. For me, if I go shopping and Tammy says, hey, Ben, I want you to pick up a tomato. You know which tomato I pick up? The biggest one. Why? Because it's obviously bigger, which means that it's better. We are that way when it comes to our houses, when it comes to audiences or salaries or skyscrapers. Muscles are bigger the better. Church attendance. Oh, we say bigger is better. It's not just that, it's little things as well. You can get a Big Mac. You ever notice the Big Mac? Or the Whopper? Or I've heard this before. You can supersize your lashes. Did you know that? I don't know what supersizing lashes means. Or those stores where every single year or almost every few months they say this, we're having the biggest sale we've ever had. Big. We associate big with excellence and greatness. And, one last thing I'll pick on us for is think about 3 weeks from now. In America, we're going to gather around dinner tables and eat the biggest meal of the year. And if you do it right, you're wearing stretchy pants that day. And we're do this meal to be thankful for what we have. And then just a few hours later, we go out and we shop for more. We believe the lie that more and bigger is better. But here's another thing going on in our culture. There's kind of a push against this, about being a simpler life. There are countless books and television shows about simplicity. You may have seen the one about tiny houses where people move to these little houses the size of a trailer. Now listen, I'm all for simplicity, but I draw the line here. I draw the line at living in 300 square feet because I love my wife to death. And I know that for her sake, she needs at least an extra 300 square feet to get away from me in the winter. Maybe this trend towards less and simplicity for tiny, maybe this is a correcting movement, I wonder, against our propensity to just get more and more. Or maybe if you're a conspiracy theorist like I am, maybe this is just another plot, to get us to buy more stuff about a new topic. I don't know. So you see where I'm going with this. I mean, Jesus had a lot to say when it comes to the issue of our stuff. He talked about this almost as much as anything else during his ministry, and so that's what we're going to look at. If we want to tidy up our lives by this discipline of simplicity, we're going to do it by hearing the stories that Jesus told when it came to this and trying to ask ourselves, Jesus, what does this story say to me? Why does this matter? And what should I do about it? So in Luke chapter 12, Jesus is there one day and there's a crowd around him and he's teaching and somebody speaks up in the crowd and says, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. And so most likely his brother was there. And by the way, this wasn't uncommon. It was common back then for people to go to the rabbi or the teacher to resolve disputes. It also, just so you know, was common back then when it came to inheritances, that the firstborn would get a double share or more than one of their siblings. So if you were the firstborn and you inherited, say, $200,000, the other sibling might only get 100 or less. And so it wasn't uncommon. And so that's what's happened here. This guy is there. Jesus, help me out. Tell my brother to give me more of the share of the inheritance. It's only fair, Jesus. And so Jesus answers him. And Jesus doesn't answer the way he wished, which, man, that is so irritating. When Jesus doesn't answer my prayers the way I wish that he would, I just throw that out there. First he says this, who appointed me to be the judge between the two of you? And then he said this famous line that maybe you've heard. Maybe you didn't even know it was something that Jesus said. But he said this. He says to watch out, to be on your guard against all kinds of greed, because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Life does not consist in the abundance of stuff. He's breaking apart this lie, and he's tying our desire, that man's desire for more inheritance, to a problem, and it's a greed problem, and it's a sin problem. More and bigger does not equal better. So watch out, he says. And then to make the point clear, he tells a story. Jesus tells stories so we understand. And he starts it out this way. He says, the ground of a certain rich man, a farmer, his land, yielded an abundant crop or a harvest. And so he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And when you first read this, it sounds like a great problem to have, doesn't it? This man has been prosperous in his business. He has a huge crop or a nest egg. He doesn't know what to do with it. And so Jesus says, the man says this. He says, you know what? This is what I'll do. I'm going to tear down my barns and I'm going to build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And then I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. So take life easy, drink, eat, and be merry. And I want to ask you first, what is wrong with this? I'll tell you, I don't know from the start. Because to me, this sounds like what financial planners have been telling us to do ever since the existence of financial planners. Any financial planners in the house? Yeah. This is what we've been told to do. Work hard, store up some wealth so that one day you can retire. You could take it easy. You could eat, drink, marry, play with the grandkids or whatever it is that you do. But then the story continues because God shows up now in the story and he confronts this man. And he says to him, he says, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you, and then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? And the man that was asking Jesus to give him more of an inheritance, and everyone else since then that has believed in Jesus has read this and taken a deep sigh because Jesus calls him out. And he calls us out. And I don't know about you, but when somebody calls me out, I don't play well. I push back, right? We don't like being called out on our stuff. I can imagine if I were in the crowd that day and Jesus said that, I'd think to myself, okay, Jesus, first, you started this story with a certain rich man. And guess what? I ain't that certain rich man, right? Because I know what the definition of rich is. And the definition of rich is somebody who always has more than me, right? It's like art. I'm not sure what art is, but I know it when I see it. I don't know what rich is, but when I look at my bank account, I don't see it. Rich is always somebody who has more than I do. And so we push back. We see the word rich. We think, aha, it's a loophole. There's some wiggle room. Jesus isn't talking to us. He's talking to that person that has more stuff than me. But do you know the way Jesus defines rich? He defines it as anybody who has their needs, what they need, and then a little bit more. And so in this story, this man had everything he needed, and then more. And the question that they wrestle with, and the one that we wrestle with as well, is what do you do with the extra? In this story, the man has to decide, and we have to decide. And what he does is he decides to store it away for his future, to do what we know is the smart thing, to set things away in a nest egg for retirement. It's something that I do every month to put towards retirement, and I hope you're able to do the same thing. And yet, when you read it, Jesus calls this man a fool. Why? Why is the essential question of this whole story. Why does Jesus call somebody a fool for doing something that we think is the right thing to do? I mean, think about it. He didn't waste his money. You know, if you know the Bible and you heard other stories that Jesus talked about stuff, he told about the prodigal son and how this prodigal son took an inheritance and he ran off and he spoiled it all and dumped it all on wild and crazy living. This guy didn't do that. He's not building huge monuments to himself. He's not ruining other people. So why is he foolish? Here's where I think it went sideways on him. And where we have to adjust our way of thinking. Because what made the man foolish was not the fact that he can accumulate wealth. It was not about being able to produce and to have a lot of stuff. It's not about whether he saved it or spent it or whether he wasted it or used it for a nice future. No, what made him foolish is he fell for this lie that the stuff is the goal, that the accumulation of wealth is what you want in the end. And then you can kick back, you can take it easy, you can eat, drink, be merry, play with the grandkids. Wealth was the end and not a means to something else. We, just like the rich man in the story, we treat money as the goal and not as a means to something greater. It's easy to misunderstand why God gives us great stuff in the first place. The man in the story, he thought that everything that he had was a blessing for himself and for his own future and for his own happiness. But Jesus calls him out. And when he calls him out, he calls us out. For anybody who has fallen for this version of a financial dream, Jesus is warning us to say more is not better, bigger is not better, unless that more and bigger is doing something great in this world. And he summed up the end of the story this way. He said, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. The man in the story is like me. He misunderstood that he was not a receptacle, but a conduit. He was not somebody who was there to just receive all of these things from God, but he was supposed to be a conduit to actually receive things and to make cool, godly stuff happen in the world. And when we adopt that mindset, our need to accumulate stuff for ourselves goes down. John Wesley, who's the founder of Methodism, he had a rule in life, a few. One was to save all that he could and to give away everything that he could. And in his early part of his ministry, he made 30 pounds a year. And in that time, he lived on 28 and he gave away 2. And over the years, his income increased to 60 and 90 and 120. And at that 120 mark, he continued to live off of 28 and to give away the rest. And people thought that was kind of suspicious back then. And you would think that was suspicious too. And so they asked him about it. He said this. He told people, I have 2 silver spoons at London and 2 at Bristol. And this is all the plate that I have at present. And I shall not buy any more while so many around me want bread. He saw a difference in what the stuff was for. There's this ancient Roman proverb as well that talks about money, and it says money is like seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. More is not better, because often if you're searching for more, it just becomes a thirst that leads to more and more and more. King Solomon, in our Jewish brothers and sisters, he was known as the wisest and the wealthiest king that ever lived. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, when you read that, it's kind of depressing at times, because it's him doing this search through life for meaning. What is the purpose of all of this? And this is what he found. In verse 7, he says this. He discovered that God made man simple, but man's complex problems were of his own devising. Listen, if anybody had an abundance of stuff and complexity in life, it was Solomon. And yet, he's the one that stumbled upon this simple truth that maybe we were wired to be simple. And yet somehow we have perverted our desires for stuff so much that the stuff makes us as thirsty as though we were drinking seawater out of a 44-ounce styrofoam cup. Maybe the books and the TV shows about living a simpler life right now, maybe they're picking up on this truth. Maybe the house craze of going to 300 square feet, while drastic, maybe it's somewhere inside a desire to get back to the way we were designed. But I want to caution you. Here's the thing is, you can listen and you can feel like, yeah, man, that's some good stuff. But this whole thing about tidying up in this series, it's not just about following some rules. Because here's the thing is we can agree that what I'm talking about is right. And if we do that and we follow some simple rules, we are setting ourselves up for what I call a practice in missing the point. Because at the heart of simplicity, at least as a spiritual discipline comes from a life-altering experience that you have with God. And once you've done that and embraced that, then there's freedom from all things in life, especially stuff. We're going to get more into that freedom next week. Because here's the thing, you see this, our tendency whenever we recognize a fault in ourselves or in others is to take a step or to take a class or to take a pill or a diet or some sort of tactic, right, to make things right. And when it comes to simplicity, it's easy to boil it down to some rules. And if you follow these rules, then you're living the simple life. But here is the caution. When you create rules around something, what you are simply saying is those things are bad. And be careful, because wealth and stuff in themselves are not bad. Creating rules and worshiping a rule, it demonizes something that really just needs to be put in its proper place in life. The spiritual discipline of simplicity is this inward reality that you come to experience with God, and the result of it is an outward lifestyle. It begins here. It begins today by allowing God to work within one of the largest parts of your life, your stuff, your possessions, your money. It's a grace that God gives you and can change you. And when he does, it's seen out here. Listen, money and stuff, the bigger, the more, is only better whenever it's used to do great, cool, godly stuff in this world. And Jesus warns us that to think any other way is foolish. So bigger does not equal better. In fact, in God's kingdom, we see the exact opposite. Less creates more. So let's embrace that as we take a moment and we pause and we pray.